Hey, Mr. Simon here. I hope you're doing well. We're going to start covering some review material here to get ready for this year's AP exam. And I've got some good news about how this year's AP exam has been changed in response to the pandemic. Uh, I'll start by pointing out that the what we're going to be working on to get ready for this year's exam are these FRQs. And I've set up a site on Replit where I have 18 different practice FRQs that we can work through. If you haven't signed up for this already, you'll want to. Right now we've got 86 people in the class. We need about 140, but if you were there that last Friday, last Friday we were in school, I had you sign up for it then. Now, normally the AP exam would have free response and multiple choice, but this year, no multiple choice, and they've halved the number of free response. We're going to have 2 free response questions. The test is only 45 minutes long, and it's going to be given on Friday, May 15th, which happens to be my birthday, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The 2 questions are not weighted equally. The first question is worth 65% of the points, and the second one is only worth 15. You're going to be timed. You're only going to have 25 minutes to answer the first question. Then you're going to have 5 minutes to upload your answer. Then you're going to have 15 minutes to respond to the second question, and then 5 more minutes to upload your answer to the second question. You cannot go back to the first question after you've uploaded it. So you're going to need to. There's going to be time pressure, and they're going to know that. So your responses should be short, and you're not going to be expected to write a lot of code. The 2 questions are going to check your knowledge of arrays and array lists, and then methods and control structures. So there's a makeup exam, so I would plan on taking the exam on May 15th, and then if you run into any technical difficulties, you'll have the option to take a makeup exam. Regardless of which test you take, the College Board is going to give me a copy of your response, and the idea is that I can then use that as part of your grade for the course. In previous years, I've always given people 100% for taking the AP exam. If you take the AP exam, then you are not required to take a final exam for the course, and that's the way I would do it this year as well. If you take the AP, there's no final exam, and you get 100% for taking the AP exam. The questions don't expect you to know all of Java, just the Java that we've covered in the class. However, if you know more Java than was taught in the course, you're welcome to use that. Any correct solution is going to get full credit, and minor errors aren't going to cost you any points, things like missing semicolons. This is interesting. This is last year's scores, and you see that more 5s, almost 27% were given than any other score. Compare that with the principals exam, where only 14% of the people who took the principals exam got a 5. Most people who took principals got a 3. Does that mean that the A exam, the Java exam, is easier? No, but it's graded on an easier system. To get a good score on the principals exam, you really need to get everything right. It's not true in Java. 50% is about the average score. Some years, the FRQs average score is like even less than 40%. And that typically is going to work out to be about a 3. Roughly 40% correct. Last year I had the data here, 41% for this exam was considered a 3. So don't stress. You don't need to get it all right to get a good score, and you're going to do better than you think you're going to do. Normally there'd be 4 FRQs, but this year there are only 2. So there's going to be one that's going to test your knowledge of arrays and array lists, and one test methods and control structures. Well, what the heck is that? A method is a function, and a control structure could be like an if statement or a loop. So you're going to write a function, and it's going to have at least one if statement and or a loop. Well, that could be anything. That sounds like every CodeBat problem we've ever done. So question number 1, we really don't know what it's going to be on, but we do know that there's going to be a question on arrays and array lists. And even though this is labeled question 3, this is going to be the first question on this year's exam. So the array list question is going to be the one that's worth about 2/3 of the points. and the other one, which could really be anything, is going to be worth about 1/3 of the points. This year's exam is open note, open book, and that includes the internet. The internet's a big place. It's going to have a lot of stuff on it that's not going to help you out. Your best notes are going to be your coding bat and replit solutions. You're going to want to be familiar with the work you've done on coding bat and replit, and when you're working on this year's FRQ, hopefully it's going to remind you of one of those problems, and you're going to be able to go back and check your solution and use that as a guide in coming up with a solution for this year's FRQ. You could, if you wanted, run your code and test it on a computer, but I think there's too much time pressure. I don't think you're going to have time to do that, and they don't care about things like semicolons and curly braces, things that the computer is going to be very fussy about. So I don't think that's a good idea, but I do think looking at your coding bat and replit solutions is going to help you. You are not allowed to collaborate with others. It's strictly forbidden to get aid while you're taking the exam, but looking at your solutions on coding bat and replit is a good way to jog your memory about how to code things. I wouldn't copy your code, though. All the code you submit for this year's exam is going to go through plagiarism detection software. Copying code from the internet will almost certainly get you a 0. So use your code as a guide to get started on your own original solution to this year's FRQs. Each question is going to be graded by a person on a 9-point scale. We don't know what those 9 points are going to be, but either you get the point or you don't. There's no half-point deductions. There's no penalties for lots of stuff that would normally give you trouble, like mixing up your square brackets with parentheses, or angle brackets, or double equals with equals, or length versus size, or putting private on a local variable, or missing curly braces or semicolons. None of those are going to count. There is going to be an open-ended question this year. Each of the 2 FRQs are going to have one question that's open-ended. We don't know what that is. They've never done this before. But we can look on the principles exam, which is open-ended, for some clues. They might ask you about the importance or the role of an algorithm, like linear search or binary search in your program, or a function, or questions on how you might change or modify your code for a different set of circumstances. On the principles exam, they ask you the biggest challenge you had in coming up with your program. Often we'll see things, too, that ask on previous year's multiple choice questions, like, well, what would happen if we changed this less than to a greater than? That came up in the sorting assignment. So things like that. But these are guesses. We really don't know. So I'm going to stop it there. If you got any questions about this year's exam, feel free to drop me an email, and then next lesson is going to be getting ready to work on a array list or an array FRQ.